Liberal Democratic Party. Senator, thanks very much for your time today. A few issues I want to touch on, but first of all, before last election, a lot of people wrote you off. To get back in, I think, was always seen as a mission impossible. You did get back in, but I think it's fair to say, with some help from the double dissolution election. Do you think you face an uphill battle this time with a regular Senate election? Oh,
yes. They've changed the voting system, as you know, to basically make it hard for minor parties. So the last election, 2016, was the first result of that changed voting system. And if it hadn't been for the double dissolution, there would have been a much smaller crossbench. What it wouldn't have done is given either the government or the opposition a majority in the Senate. Those days are over. And so I think what we're dealing with for the future is a smaller crossbench than we've had, but still the crossbench will have the balance of power. There's very little chance that either side will gain a majority. So my future, yes. I got 9.5% in 2013 when I was first elected. That was primary vote, that wasn't preferences. That went down to 3.5% in 2016 when I wasn't number one on the ballot paper. So, yeah, there's a big question mark about whether I've been able to increase that vote, whether I'm better known, whether I'll have a favourable position on the ballot paper. You know, hard to say.
Yeah, it is a big factor, isn't it? What about then? Because Tasmania has the shuffling of ballot papers, and it's, you know, the fate of a crossbencher doesn't, or anyone can often rely on the fact that who gets number one. Would it be a more fair system that every single ballot paper is randomised as you're voting?
Yes, there's a degree of fairness to that. It's called Robson rotation. They use it in the ACT and Tasmania as well. It's called Robson rotation, so nobody gets the donkey vote. And yeah, I like it, but I don't much like the current voting system for the Senate, the new one anyway. I think the preference system that was in place perhaps could have been tweaked a bit, but the result is an awful lot of people are voting, and their vote is not electing somebody. It's exhausting, and I don't see how that's good for democracy.
So what about that, Senator, if I can jump in, sorry, because when we were leading up to the last election, there was talk of the Senate crossbench effectively going to boycott whatever the government might bring up because there was so much anger at trying to cut out the minor parties. Are you talking about something similar? Are you going to try to make waves before this reality is about to hit?
Actually, I never heard anything about any crossbench conspiracy to that effect, to be frank. Most of us were angry about it. We predicted that the government wouldn't be achieving what it thought it was going to achieve, which is a better chance of getting control of the Senate. I know the government was very frustrated with the likes of Jackie Lambie and Glenn Lazarus, for example, and never being able to persuade them to see it their way. So, you know, and somehow or other they thought that the change in the voting system and the double dissolution would deal with that. Well, Lambie got back in again and only lost her seat due to the dual occupancy. Lazarus did lose his seat. But the government is no better off. They've got 12 now on the crossbench, well, 11, since Lucy Gashui went off to join the Liberal Party. They still need all but 2 of them to get a majority in the Senate. Whether they win or lose the next election, well, if they win, they will still need the support of most of the crossbench. If Labor wins, they will still need support of both the Greens and most of the crossbench. I don't know what was achieved.
I guess we'll see if ultimately it helps them. As we say, this time around, there might be at least fewer of the crossbench. But just finally on this,
there will be fewer.
Do you have any discussions? Yeah, I know. I've sort of had a look at it. So they will still need some of the crossbench. I see what you're saying. You know,
there'll be 4 current crossbenchers who will survive or who won't be up for re-election. That's Hanson, Bernardi, Patrick and Griff. So they've got 6-year terms. Everybody else is up at the next election. I would imagine there'll be maybe 3 or 4 that are elected around the states. So they'll end up with a crossbench of 7 or 8, something like that, around about that number. And I would imagine the government, whichever side it is, we'll still need the bulk of them.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering, though, are there any discussions at all with the government or Labor on the Senate rules, or this is just something that's not for turning for both sides?
Well, no, I'm a member of I'm a participating member of JSCEM, that's the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters, and we have been looking at all the aspects to do with the 2016 election, what lessons to be learned, and does the system need changing. There is no appetite for messing about with the Senate voting at the moment. I would have started a discussion about it if I thought I had a chance, but there's no appetite for it at all.